recording. Alright, let me get my sheets.
How are your toes?
Okay. Alright, we are now up to Roman numeral 4, right?
Yes.
Here we go, show. Okay. Kashrut, keeping kosher. So the Torah lists kosher species. It's Pashat Shmini coming up in a couple of weeks. We have a bar mitzvah that week, so your bar mitzvah boys take on Kashrut. He'll be great. He's a very bright kid. Torah lists the species of animals that one can eat and organizes them in sort of interesting taxonomy. First mentions the land animals, then does the sea animals, then does the birds. So that's sort of the system. It's not different from Linnaeus, let's calculate, classifications, but that's the system. So the land animals, the Torah gives very clear rules. Animal has to have split hooves and has to chew its cud in order to be a kosher species. Okay, so some examples. What has a split hoof and chews its cud? What's a kosher animal? Some cows. What else?
Pig.
No. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you.
What, no?
Pigs have split hooves. As you know, the hoof goes right through, but they don't chew their cud. They're actually the only animal that has split hoof and doesn't chew its cud.
Which one?
Pigs.
Ah, okay.
Lots of animals don't have split hooves and don't chew their cud. No animal chews its cud.
And doesn't have.
That's, I don't know, wait a second. I'm not positive about that either. What about, no, because I think camels, right?
Camels do.
Yeah, camels chew their, great. Camels chew their cud.
Chew their cud.
Yeah, and so do llamas and all those things.
Right.
And horses maybe.
Horses, I don't think so. I don't know. I know that camels.
Not horses, but camels do. So fine. So that, good. Okay. So there are animals that chew cud but don't have split hooves. The pig is the only one that has split hooves and doesn't chew its cud. Either way, it's not kosher. Kosher animals: cow,
Lamb.
bison, sheep, goat, deer. Maybe a few others. But whatever.
What? So
Yeah.
I guess that you. I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but what is like the thinking behind these 3 rules? I mean, why? What defines? These kind of animals or like.
Let's pause for a second. Okay, it's a great question. It's a very important question. It's an obvious question. We'll get there in a minute. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Second, so let's lay out. Fish, the sea animals, sea creatures, Torah's rules has to have fins and scales. It's so interesting because there's no fish that has scales but not fins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting question why the Torah adds that detail. Because really it should just say it has to have scales. The fins doesn't really add any new information because there are fish that have fins but no scales, but there is no animal that has scales but no fins. This is already noticed by the Talmud. There's no sort of, okay? So kosher species, so kosher fish would be salmon, trout, halibut,
A lot of the whitefishes.
Also
whitefish, sardines, tuna fish, many kinds of fish. Non-kosher fish would include
Catfish.
catfish, shark, dolphin,
Eel.
eel, good. All stingrays, good. All forms of shellfish, clams, mussels, lobster, scallops, oysters.
But do oysters and lobsters considered to be fish?
They're considered the Torah lists them as like things that crawl in the sea. If it's in the sea, it has to have fins and scales. Torah just all of the sort of creepy crawlies are also, all of them are entirely non-kosher. So some of the land creatures that are edible are just the hooves and chew their cud. Other creepy crawlies in the sea or on land are not kosher. The exception of certain types of grasshoppers and locusts, which are kosher, but you need, most Jews have lost the tradition of how to identify which are the kosher grasshoppers and locusts and which are not. But you may meet some older people from Morocco or wherever who preserve the tradition of this type of grasshopper. We, in our family, in our village, we knew this was a kosher species, and we preserve that knowledge from generation to generation, and we eat these grasshoppers, whatever. So you can still, can be done. So there's people today, Jews today, eat grasshoppers. And then the bird, the Torah doesn't list any determining factors. It just lists species of non-kosher bird. They all are various types of birds of prey. The Talmud kind of identifies that the thing that we don't eat are birds of prey. We eat, vegetarian birds, or not really. Birds that aren't birds of prey. Birds that don't grasp with talons. They don't use their feet or their talons for eating. They don't tear with their beaks. So non-kosher birds are eagles and vultures and owls. Storks are all non-kosher. And the kosher birds are the, calmer birds. Now, the Talmud sort of then took this sort of more broad, again, the Torah just lists species. The Talmud then takes this list and generalizes principles from that list, generalizes from that list, and then sort of finds 4 different criterion that you can identify, that can help you identify a kosher bird. And basically, they're ways to kind of tell its diet. A kosher bird will have 3, when it's their stands, or it will have 3 toes in front and 1 in back. If it sits on a branch, it'll have 3 in front and 1 in back, as opposed to non-kosher, it'll have 2 and 2. So you see a parakeet. Parakeet is like a colorful eagle. Okay, it has. If it sits on a branch, it has 2 things in front and 2 in back. It basically has a foot that it can use, and it does. You see, parrots and parakeets will use their feet for picking up things and eating them, just like an eagle will do. Whereas a chicken or a dove sitting on a branch has 3 in front and 1 in back. Okay? Doves are kosher, parrots are not.
Doves are kosher?
Doves are kosher, yeah. Absolutely. Doves and pigeons are kosher, for sure.
I just think of doves as being just so pretty and nice, but I don't know if that's true.
I think they are very pretty, very nice, and that's
Sweet.
not a reason that, so are
They're also nice cows.
I know, there are nice cows too.
chickens too, chickens also. So look,
I know.
okay. that's the reality. This is that's where it comes from. Also, the other signs of kosher birds has to do with their digestive system, basically, and their anatomical signs. It has a crop in a certain way. That's a sign that it eats seeds and plants. It has a gizzard of a certain kind. That's a sign that it eats seeds and plants. Right? Birds don't have teeth. They can't chew things, so they have a gizzard, which is like an organ in their. So kosher birds have a gizzard that you can peel by hand. If you slice the gizzard open, there's an inner lining that you can peel with your hand. Okay?
People eat gizzard, right?
You can eat gizzard. Yeah, you make it into like a soup or something.
I think my grandma used to eat gizzard.
Yeah. I've tried gizzard soup.
Is it good?
I didn't like it very much, but it's supposed to be very healthy. Lots of mystical powers, I don't know. Gizzard, but really it's a sign that this bird eats plants and seeds. That's why it has a gizzard. Okay, and so kosher bird, you can cut it open, you can peel the okay. Now, and through time, then traditions developed of which birds were kosher and which weren't kosher. And about 400 years ago, 500 years ago, the trend shifted to sort of caring much more about establishing a tradition that this bird was eaten than being able to anatomically sort of identify all of the signs. So sort of one transition bird for this is the turkey, which came from the New World. There was no tradition anywhere of Jews eating turkeys, but anatomically a turkey is almost identical to a chicken, right? I mean, you've cooked turkey, right? You've seen, it looks like a large chicken. Anatomically it's very similar to a chicken. It has all the signs of kosher bird, but no Jews ever ate a turkey until modern times. Until modern times, and so turkeys are eaten by Jews all over the world, but there's some like a controversy about turkeys. Some Jews don't eat turkeys. And after the turkey, that was like the last one that kind of snuck in under the radar, probably because people thought it came from India. But other birds we only eat if we can establish there's a Masorah tradition of eating them. And throughout then subsequent Jewish history, there's been lots of halachic scholarship identifying which types of birds are in fact, what counts as a chicken. Right? The chickens we eat today, they're different. There are like hundreds and hundreds of types of chickens. You can go to efowl.com and you can order for delivery to your home chicks of hundreds of different types of chickens, which people raise as pets or for meat or for eggs. And which of these are kosher? Which of these are sufficiently similar to the types of chickens that our ancestors ate that we can say these are kosher? Same thing with ducks and geese, and even more exotic birds.
So who are the groups that don't eat turkey?
Very few. It's not like a location. It's like one rabbi in the 17th century who didn't eat turkey, and his descendants, I think it's like biological descendants have the custom not to eat turkey. But turkey is eaten by almost all Jews eat turkey now. But where you would have some of this controversy is called the muscovy duck, which is a native duck to America. I think one was sent from New Orleans to Jerusalem in the very late 19th century or early 20th century for judgment. And the more common practice now is not to eat the muscovy duck. They're very strange looking birds. It's a duck, but we never ate it. Maybe it's a jarus, maybe it's a bird of prey. Looks kind of aggressive, a little scary. You had chickens that were introduced. The Cochin chicken was brought from India to England in the 19th century, and it was became a rage. It was a very popular chicken. And you had rabbis writing books about this chicken, saying this chicken's not kosher, it's too aggressive, and it's not the chickens that our ancestors ate. We have the remote Roman mosaics of chickens, so we know the types of chickens that existed in the ancient world. Our chickens are very different, but in so many different ways. So all of these birds have to be judged, and we've sort of narrowed down the number of birds that we eat. Only some kinds of ducks now are commonly eaten. Quail and partridge, we sort of lost, some of the species of diversity of quail partridge species we've lost over the years. We no longer eat pheasants by and large, although there are two people working on this problem. One is a fellow in Israel named Ari Zivotofsky, who has these banquets every couple of years, where he tries to get every possible kosher food and serve it at this meal, so that 250 people at the meal can say, I ate pheasant, and therefore I can be a link in that chain saying pheasant is kosher. There's also Rabbi Loiki in New York who feels that's not really sufficient, that's not meaningful. What you have to do is actually, if you want to say this type of duck, let's say, is kosher, so observe its life cycle for 2 or 3 generations, see how its life cycle is very similar to these other types of ducks, and see how when you introduce it to a room with other ducks, it goes and plays with the ducks, it acts like a duck, it sort of has its life cycle similar to a duck, and then we can say this counts as, this is close enough to the ducks that we eat to say this counts as a type of duck. And even the more so if we can find somebody who said, well, my village in Bulgaria, we used to eat this type of duck, even the more so. And so Rabbi is trying to do that. The story he told when he was in college, he told his guidance counselor he wants to be a rabbi and he wants to do stuff with birds. And the guidance counselor was forget about it. And now he's the big expert on kosher birds for the area. This is what he does. So he, I recently, you heard from him that there's a type of pheasant that he's trying to get rehabilitated as kosher, and there's a type of duck that he's breeding, to kind of get its supply of, because it's this really, it's not very commonly bred, this species of duck, and he got it, declared kosher, so he wants people to breed it more and have more of them in existence. There's this type of partridge from, lives in Iran, which is the most endangered kosher bird on earth, just trying to get supplies, so it's his big passion, and it's kind of neat. He came to Princeton, we lived there and worked there and did a workshop. He brought all these birds that lives in our basement for the week, and he did all these demonstrations. It's really, really fascinating. I'd love to actually bring him here. It'd be a lot of fun to bring him here. You'd have to, we have to pay to fly him in, and you'd have to buy the birds locally, but he does really great demonstrations. It's really, really, really cool. He wrote a book also, which I'm happy to show you. He just goes bird by bird and sort of some of the story behind the kosher species of these birds. So the birds are the most interesting. I think the animals, it's pretty if you have an animal, it doesn't take you very long to tell if it's kosher or not. If you have a fish, it doesn't take you very long if it's kosher or not, except for swordfish. Swordfish have something which is like scales, not exactly like scales, when they're young and they fall off, and does it count, does it not count? I think, in terms of like sort of halachic scholars in the modern Orthodox community, Rabbi Tendler years ago said swordfish is not kosher, Herschel Schechter said swordfish is kosher. I think Schechter is a little more influential now than he was maybe 10 or 20 years ago, and so probably more and more people are going to eat swordfish. So
is it considered kosher?
So again, I don't think the kashrut agencies will allow you to serve it in a restaurant, but if Schechter, who's a pretty influential rabbi, says it is kosher, and I think at Ari Zivotofsky's banquets in Jerusalem, they serve swordfish.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a yeah. I also think you're not supposed to eat them now. I think they're endangered, and they say you're not supposed to eat them.
That's another question.
Okay, so it is another question. Yeah. It's also important. So there's species of Torah species. Let's talk a little about why. So you have a couple of different, in the looking at the people have been wondering about this for a long time, and you have some people say like Ramban, like Ahmad is saying that non-kosher species will kind of poison your soul. So these are dirty animals. They're scavengers, or they're garbage, or they're aggressive animals in some way. If you eat them, you'll become aggressive. Your character will be harmed. Maimonides, who writes that they're unhealthy, the Torah prohibits them because they're unhealthy. This is rejected by Barbanel, who, Maimonides says, yeah, look, if the Torah, no, they're unhealthy, pigs are dirty animals, they live in mud, they spread mud everywhere. If we were to keep pigs as food, then our homes and our villages would be disgusting, dirty places, and if you need any proof, just go look at France. And so he says, look how dirty it is there. And then Barbanel writes, Maimonides lived his entire life in a Muslim environment where they didn't eat pigs. Barbanel, who lived in Christian Europe, responds to Maimonides and says it's not true. Like the pig eaters are very vigorous and healthy, and doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that. Maimonides also writes that there are certain rules of the Torah where the goal is not. And this is called in philosophical language is called the question of continence versus virtue. Is the goal is self-control the ethos to cultivate, or should we try to cultivate a sense of virtue and we don't want to do things that are bad or prohibited, right? So, and Maimonides explains that this seems to be a contradiction between the ethos of the Talmud, which seems to endorse continence, self-control, and the ethos of Aristotle, who says that virtue is the goal. And Maimonides says, well, actually the two are reconciled. It depends on what the mitzvah is in particular. When it comes to the rational mitzvot, the self-evident mitzvot, the goal is virtue. So you want to reach a state where you don't desire to harm other people. Like the Torah is all sorts of ethical prohibitions and mitzvot, and the goal of one's life is to cultivate virtue regarding to those mitzvot, so that your natural inclination is aligned with those mitzvot. There are other mitzvot where if the Torah hadn't commanded them, we never would have thought of them on our own. And with those mitzvot, virtue isn't a relevant category. Self-control is the only relevant. So we should say, you're not supposed to say the Talmud, because the Talmud saying, don't say, I can't eat lobster. Say, yum, lobsters are delicious, but I can't eat it because the Torah prohibits it. Right? So if it comes to non-kosher food, that sort of ethos of self-control is endorsed by the Talmud, and he thinks is endorsed by philosophy as well. When it comes to, but you never say, you never say that type of statement about the prohibition against harming somebody. It's not. You shouldn't say, I would love to, kill somebody, but I can't because the Torah prohibits it. That's not the goal, right? The goal for those type of mitzvot is virtue. So within that paradigm, there may not be any lesson learned from kashrut other than an example of self-control. It's a lesson in you can't just take whatever you want and eat it. I think go back to the Garden of Eden story. What's the primal sin? It's like you see something and you take it and you eat it, right? You consume it. It's seeing the entire world as yours for the taking, and this puts limits. You can't just eat everything that you might want to eat. There are limits, and so it doesn't really matter what they are, what those limits are, what those species are. The important thing is we live in a world of limits. The Torah gives us limits, and that is sort of core to just being an ethical person who can act in an ethical way. So it's really the not eating, the keeping kosher is not per se important. It's just that it trains you in discipline. It teaches you that the entire world doesn't belong to you, to grab and take whatever you want, that you live in a world of limits that God imposes upon you, and if you kashrut trains you in a discipline that hopefully can then be like channeled in more significant directions. Another possibility is that, and this you see, kind of, and the ones who really understood this are the Christians. If you look in the New Testament where it describes kashrut, in the book of Acts, it's Peter, I think he's on the way, he's on a trip, and he's hungry, and he has this vision of all this non-kosher food coming down from heaven, and the voice says, eat, he's like, can't eat, it's not kosher, and like 3 times it comes down, and finally this voice says, no, eat, like, don't you understand? Like, there is no difference anymore. All these old distinctions are no longer relevant. The difference between Jew and Gentile and kosher and non-kosher are all eradicated now that Jesus has come. And that's like a very important, I think very powerful message of Christianity, this universalism, right? And so just as the division between Jew and Gentile has been wiped away in Jesus, so too the distinction between kosher and non-kosher foods has been wiped away. And that is like a message of Christianity. It's that story is there, black and white in the New Testament, and it's really a reading of Leviticus where the laws of kashrut are told, where that chapter sort of concludes by saying, I am Lord your God, I have separated you from the other people to be holy to me, and you should be holy in your observance of these laws of kashrut. And so there's a parallel there in that God's choice selection of Israel for a special, distinct role in the world is parallel to you can eat some things, you can't eat other things. And I think it could be like just a very, and this is not my thesis, this is a rabbi and professor, Meir Soloveitchik, who developed this in a very persuasive essay. God's choice of Israel is arbitrary, but it's still significant, and whether you can eat this animal or that animal is also ultimately arbitrary. But we kind of respect that arbitrary selection in reminder of we live in a world where certain things have been selected for arbitrary reasons, but with significance nonetheless. So, okay, yeah, a cow is no better than pig for food, but God said eat the cow, don't eat the pig, and okay, so that means something to me. And a Jew is no better than a Gentile, but God said to the Jews, take the Torah, and I want you to have this role in history by holding on to the Torah. And so therefore it becomes almost like a metaphor or a symbol of like certain things are selected and they have significance because of that selection, even though from some other perspective it's kind of arbitrary. So I don't know. In reaction to that, that's a bunch I talked for a lot. In reaction to those ideas, it's
Yeah, I like that. I also I forget what I read, but I read something a few years ago about keeping kosher. I want to say it was the rabbi who wrote Why Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Oh, really?
What was this? I can't.
Harold Kushner.
Yeah, I think it was Harold Kushner, and he was writing about how keeping kosher is it's similar to keeping Shabbat. It's kind of like this moment to pause. You it's something we do every day, and we eat every day. So it forces you to have a moment to pause in our busy lives of working and interacting in like the secular world all around us, and just have a moment to remind yourself like, I'm Jewish and this is important to me.
Look, eating is who am I quoting? I forget who this was, but eating is something that everyone does. Like all animals eat, and so humans, we kind of elevate that through cuisine and etiquette. Like the Greeks, sort of had this whole system of etiquette at a meal to take this animal function that we need to survive and to elevate it into something human and cultured. And the way they did that was by etiquette. It's a meal, it's a symposium, and you lie down, there's this course and that course, and cuisine is part of that as well, and so, right. So we, I think, take it one step further. We sanctify the act, we don't just elevate it into something cultured. We sanctify this animal function by reciting blessings before and after we eat, by only eating certain things, and we turn it into a part of our religious lives. And which is similar to that idea that you're saying, right? Another way to say this is a different Soloveitchik, right? Joseph Soloveitchik, the very, very famous Soloveitchik, wrote a book called Halachic Man, where he describes the life of halakha, the observant life, as sort of existing in the world with sort of a priori blueprint. That halakha is this all-encompassing total system of law and definitions and characteristics that define all types of human interactions, human relationships, and also the natural world as well. And so which is true. And then the job of the observant Jew then is we sort of go out into the world armed with this blueprint, and which we then impose on the universe through our study and so a halachic man sees the sunset and he doesn't just see a sunset. He says, "Oh, now the sun is setting, so now it's too late to say the mincha prayers, but now the obligation to recite the evening Shema has begun." Or it's a Friday, well now the sanctity of Shabbat has descended, and now these prohibitions are at play, and these positive mitzvot kick in. And so this natural phenomenon, which is maybe just an aesthetic experience for some, for the halachic man, is infused with meaning by this sort of system of halacha that he imposes on things observed. And so with that perspective, of course eating is going to have rules. How could food not have rules? Because it's so important to what we do, it's so important to how we sort of experience the universe and interact with the universe. And stay alive, then of course it has to have its own rules. So it shouldn't be surprised from that perspective that the Torah has rules for food as well. Okay. In addition, the Torah has certain body parts that are forbidden, even of kosher species. So these are certain types of fat from animals, like certain, I actually don't know enough about animal anatomy. I couldn't identify it if it walked up to me and shook my hand, but there are certain fats that are part of that they can't eat. The Torah says you can't eat these types of fats. Also, the sciatic nerve of animals, it's like the gina nasha, it's like a part of this part of the animal can't be eaten. In the olden days, there was a skilled profession among Jews to take slaughtered animals and then sort of remove the forbidden parts of the animal, with a very sharp knife. And this was called, in Hebrew, nikor. In Yiddish, it was called trebering. I think this is rarely done anymore because in America we just cut the animal in half and they sell the back half to a non-kosher meat processing plant. Everything is done very fast and efficient, so it's not a skill that's really done anymore. I think with rare exception. So this is why you can't get kosher sirloin, because that part of the cow is just it gets processed by a non-kosher meat seller. It is possible though to very carefully remove the forbidden parts, and you could have kosher sirloin, just you can't find it in America. Other non-kosher parts of kosher animals are the blood. Blood can't be eaten. Torah says blood represents the life force of the animal. Blood can't be eaten. So we basically remove the blood. Meat has to be soaked and salted before it's eaten. This is also something which is never done anymore by most people, by consumers, by householders. It's all done before we buy the meat in the butcher shop or in the factory, wherever. It's done way, way in advance. So it used to be that every Jew knew how to soak and salt, her own chicken, whatever. And maybe a generation or two ago, Jewish girls learned to do this in day school. This was part of a Jewish education. How do you prepare kosher chicken? You would buy it from the butcher shop. Without this being done, you would have to soak and salt it yourself. But it'd be hard pressed to find anyone younger than 60 who has ever done this, because it's just when you buy it, it's already done. But it does happen, okay? And I've read about it in yeshiva, and I was examined on it without ever having seen it done. I have since seen it done once. I've done it once, but it's but that's again the blood symbolizes the life force of the animal. We eat it, but again part of that's an ethos of respect, I think, for the natural world, for limits, etc. We can't eat everything. Other non-kosher parts of kosher animals, I believe that is all, but not here on the list, but really should be. Very important actually, is 3 points. Animals and birds, though not fish, have to be eaten if they after shechita, if they're slaughtered in a appropriate, in a sort of the kosher way. In the absence of shechita, the animal could be one of two things. It could be, it's really a dead animal that is a dead animal that wasn't checked is called nevela, and it's also not kosher. So it could be a cow that was, so your beef from a normal non-kosher butcher shop is called nevela. It's entirely not kosher in a severe way, because there was no shechita, it wasn't ritually slaughtered, according to the laws of kashrut. There's also a phrase called treif or treifa, which is actually, that could be an animal that was slaughtered, but this is an animal that had a mortal wound some sort of injury that would have killed it had it not been slaughtered. So animal has to be healthy at slaughter in order to be kosher. Animal that's injured in one of like certain number of ways is considered non-kosher also. So that's a treif piece of meat. So what's done after slaughter, we check just to make sure the animal is healthy, and if we see certain things, and that's the difference between glatt kosher. That means we sort of a higher standard of checking to see if the animal, to make sure it wasn't a treifa, to make sure it wasn't, after slaughter you discover, the animal had a puncture this or missing that or whatever, and the organs, some of the organs weren't so healthy, then it's a treifa, you can't eat it. Again, glatt is just a higher standard of checking the lungs in particular. Glatt means smooth in Yiddish, like that there are no adhesions on the lungs that could render the animal a treifa. There are different standards of how, and glatt has become sort of pretty universal in America because of market forces and stuff. Also because in America, if it's not glatt, if you discover that it's a treifa, you check, you have a high standard of checking to see if the animal's a treifa, does it have lung adhesions, etc. If it is a treifa, if you sell it to the non-kosher division, it's not a total loss. You still make a profit. So we can have that higher standard without too much worry, right? In other words, in certain places in Europe, if you shechted a cow and it was a treifa, that was a huge loss. So more lenient standards developed. Or now it's a treifa, so you sell it to the non-kosher division of your big meat processing plant, and it isn't such a significant loss. Also, more cows are treifas now than they used to be because they eat very unhealthy food and with a very unhealthy lifestyle. They eat corn in feedlots,
Right.
and the dust of the feedlot isn't good for their lungs, and the bacteria and the manure. It's like cows live in like basically giant cow cities without plumbing, right? So it's very unhealthy, and they eat a very unhealthy diet. They shed them very young. They grow very fast because of the diet, and they shed them very young, and they're not particularly healthy. So you have much more instances of animals being treif than a generation ago before animals moved indoors.
So can treif be also as a consequence of a disease and not an injury?
It's disease or injury. Yeah, it's disease or injury.
Okay.
And there's certain signs that the tradition, that the Talmud discusses of what makes a treifa. I don't know them well, but like injury, yeah, I think like the adhesion in the lung is a result of some sort of disease that the animal has.
And for fish, so every kosher fish, no matter how you cook it or make it, as long as it's like in kosher, obviously.
Right. So we'll talk about there are things that could go wrong in terms of absorbing taste, etc. Like in the kosher utensils, we'll talk about that.
But generally speaking,
there's no need for shechita. So with fish, what you have to do is verify that it is from a kosher species. So you have to make sure it has fins and scales. So fins you have to worry about. Scales, you have to see the scales. So, meaning if you can't tell, if you see a fillet, you can't tell if it's catfish fillet or, I don't know, whatever, flounder fillet, right? You can't necessarily tell. And there actually is a pretty serious problem. You can Google this, of fish shops mislabeling fish species. So it is actually a real problem. So you should either you go buy a piece that's certified kosher from a kosher fish monger, or you buy a piece of fish that still has the skin on it, so that, the scales you're probably not going to find, but you'll find skin that is evidence that it used to have scales, because if you can remove the scales and the skin is still there, that means it had scales, as opposed to a shark where nothing to remove, right? So that's what it's at. So you can buy cuts of fish, like whole fish, right, let's say, or cuts of fish that still have the scales on, or the skin on, so you can tell it had scales. That's fine from any non-kosher fish shop, or something certified kosher. Also, I've heard salmon, you can get salmon fillets, because I don't think there's any non-kosher species of fish that has a color. Yeah. The red is a lot of fish on anyway, but if it's farm salmon, it's red because they feed it food coloring, stuff. But there is no non-kosher species of fish that will have red, pink flesh like that, and so salmon also is, you can get the different types of cuts you can get with salmon are a little bit more broad. But you don't have to worry about the shechita or blood being soaked. None of that is necessary for fish. You have to worry about the knife they use to cut it and fillet it, or cut it, whatever they're doing to it. You have to worry with the knife. The knife, he's chopping sharks, and then he's chopping your, sea bass, whatever. So because it's all cold, though, we'll talk about this maybe next time, I think. So if it's all cold, you can just rinse it under cold water before you cook it, and that's fine.
Okay.
So you can buy fish in just about any place. So that's going to be okay.
Can I ask a question about
Of course.
I know, so it's obviously the way that they're slaughtered can make it kosher, but the way that they're raised, how do they monitor, like, is there a certain standard?
So, I mean, sadly not.
Okay.
Because that's a real, American, look, Nixon, it's all Nixon's fault. Nixon, the system was, right, it used to be, for centuries, really for all of human history, farmers had this problem of boom and bust, and they would go, right, there were good years and bad years they would starve, and right, so this problem was solved by Franklin Roosevelt, who instituted a system of, after his terrible crop failures in the 30s, and the Great Dust Bowl, and right, think of Grapes of Wrath, and Woody Guthrie, okay, so Roosevelt instituted a system where they would basically buy surplus grain in good years and use that and then sell it in bad years to keep the price of grain stable. Okay? So they had it's like a federal grain reserve. That's what they did. Nixon did away with the federal grain reserve. He actually sold it to the Soviet Union, who in turn sold it back on the commodities market when the prices rose, which was the sign that was the beginning of the end for Soviet communism, that they were engaging in this sort of commodities trading. But Nixon sold off the federal grain reserve and instituted a system of price supports. So instead, what the system that since the 70s, the system in place is the federal government guarantees a price for grain. Wheat, soy, corn, the federal government guarantees a price, and if the market price is below that price, the federal government meets the difference. The advantage of the difference with the shift to the system, the federal government doesn't have to worry about the grain reserves because that's better for them, but it also incentivizes farmers to grow as much as they can, because there's no longer any supply and demand echo. They're not getting any price pressure if they flood the market, because I can grow as many tons of corn as I possibly can on my farm, and I'm guaranteed a price per ton by the federal government. They'll make up the difference in price. And so this led to a dramatic increase in production of corn and soy and wheat, and a dramatic drop in the price of these products on the market. And so that's when sugar was taken out of soda and replaced with corn syrup, because corn became so cheap, because the federal government is basically subsidizing corn, right, for industrial usage. And that's when animals moved indoors into these feedlots and started eating corn. Right, cows eat grass, right? Chickens also used to roam around and eat all sorts of things. But since corn is so cheap, and the federal government is keeping the price of corn so low, this is when they have these confined animal feed operations, like these big feedlots where they're eating a mostly corn diet. So this has all sorts of bad implications for their health, for the environment, for all sorts of which you can read about, and etc. So you can buy pastured kosher meat. There are 2 sellers on the East Coast who will ship frozen kosher meat that is pastured, not raised in feedlots. One is a company called Grow and Behold. Their meat, I think, isn't 100% pasture. I think their meat maybe eats some corn. And then there's a company called Kol Foods, K-O-L, Kol Foods, which birds and meat and lamb and ducks, whatever, it's all entirely raised in pastures, eating grass and insects and whatever, and not eating grain. And so it's extremely expensive. It's shipped frozen from Maryland. It's extremely expensive, but you eat less of it, which maybe is part of the point, and it tastes totally different. We used to eat it a lot. It's a little too expensive. We don't do it so much anymore, but it tastes completely different. It's it's really it's really something. It cooks differently, tastes different. These animals have a totally different diet than.
I was just one of my latest projects at work was around the American meat supply chain for the biggest meat supplier in the US. And what we had to do is analyze exactly what you're talking about. So first of all, you're spot on. So if you do that job, you was mornings, you're welcome to join us. But what you're saying is actually very correct. I didn't realize like the what you just described about corn, like the history. I didn't know
I
it.
think
But
that's history, yeah.
one thing that is interesting and might make this shift in animals' feed to more natural, I would call it, is that there's a growing consumer, not Jewish, but general consumer pressure to, first of all, you know, it's like a humanitarian thing to make sure that we're treating animals with more respect, and you see like big chains like Whole Foods, etc. that are gaining a lot of share on the expense of the big ones. So it looks like even the biggest players in the market are shifting. So I think like in the future it might be actually
that would be
easier
really,
to
that would be really nice. That would be good. And the other kasha implication, I think the ethos of meaning shchita, which we haven't talked about. We'll say something about shchita. It's very, very sensitive to avoiding pain and suffering to the animal in the moment of slaughter. That might lead us to also be concerned about those such things like the rest of the life of the animal leading up to the moment of slaughter. And you know, animals living in pastures, like that's they're evolved to kind of live in that environment, and whereas in a feedlot it doesn't seem to be so pleasant for them. Another kasha implication, you know, dairy cows eat a lot of corn. It causes this again, the cows, they chew their cud, they're evolved to eat grass. If they eat corn, they get kind of gassy sometimes, and that is not so healthy for them. And one of the forms of treating that is to puncture the abomasum with your stomach and kind of basically squeeze out the excess gas. That renders them a treifa. That renders them milk a treifa. So that would be a reason why, you know, maybe because of this, like maybe like our milk supply isn't really as kosher as we think it is, because like this like sort of medical procedure they're doing on some percentage of dairy cows in America, which is the result of the unhealthy corn diets that they're eating now, and not enough grass in their diets.
So dairy from a treifa cow will be non-kosher?
Yeah. The milk of a milk. Right. So the way we can talk about this either, so I'll also go into update the thing. Milk and eggs of kosher animals are kosher. Milk and eggs of non-kosher animals are not kosher. So if the animal is a treifa that has one of these injuries, then the eggs and the milk are also not kosher. So if you puncture the stomach of a cow and then you milk it, that milk is not kosher.
So salmon caviar, for example, is kosher.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ostrich eggs are not. But duck eggs and quail eggs are.
Okay. What is quail? What is quail?
Quail is Slav.
Yeah.
Shchita. So shchita, I've never seen shchita I've seen it for birds. It's a very, very sharp knife, extremely sharp knife. It's sharpened on a stone. You test the blade of the knife on your finger. You sort of run the knife over your finger to check for any roughness or a nick or an imperfection in the blade, because the cut has to be straight. Nothing has to catch on the animal that would cause tearing or pulling. You can't apply pressure, you can't tear, can't pull. It's a whoosh, like that, okay? The shchita I've seen was done, meaning I don't know if maybe it's not done quite this well, again, like a factory operation where you have you do a certain number per hour to make quota, I don't know. But the shchita I saw, which was very meticulous shochet, he cared, real sensitivity, really, like not, his blade, I felt this blade, it was like butter. I mean, that's what you do if you used to be like the rabbi would go and visit the shochet, and you would show him, the shochet would show the rabbi his knives, and the rabbi would examine the knives, very nice, and this is what, when people in this business meet each other, they show them their knives, they inspect, very nice, very good, and if a shochet doesn't want to show you his knives, that's like a bad sign, he's trying to hide something, he's not being as meticulous as he should be. So this knife, it was like butter. I mean, it was like so smooth, so incredibly sharp, and smooth, not a single imperfection in the blade. It's really, really amazing. So it's done with you cut the trachea and the esophagus in one cut, without pressure, without tearing, without stabbing. You don't cut through to the bone; that would damage the knife. And there are various other rules as well, which I no longer very, I feel a little bit guilty that I'm not quite as current as I should be on these rules of shkita. Again, this is really not done so much by, it's done by professionals now who would do, but,
So a question
Yeah.
about that, I haven't read enough about this, but like I come from a place where like I ate venison growing up.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah,
peninsula.
sure.
So, venison.
Yeah, so
is
deer,
kosher
bison,
animal.
yeah, so you can get kosher
How-
venison, so you have to shecht it, you can raise them in captivity,
Okay,
or you capture it, and
okay,
you shecht it,
okay,
and you can get kosher bison, you can get kosher venison.
okay,
It's a little more expensive, because it's not so easy to raise these
Yeah.
things in farms, and, they're not
yeah,
domestic animals, so it's not so easy to do, but you could find it, yeah.
okay.
I don't know if there's any, yeah, maybe shallots, I don't know, shallots are the fancy kosher restaurants, but they might have bison or
Mhm.
venison for sale,
Yeah.
but,
I just felt like I'm mostly vegetarian now anyways, just.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
you can do it, it can be
but-
done, it's
but
definitely
I grew
done.
up eating it, so.
Yeah, it's definitely,
Interesting.
you can get it kosher, but it's a lot more expensive, because you can't just not like your Uncle Harvey in a shotgun,
Yep.
like bring home, like, sorry, not enough, whatever, but,
Oh,
so.
what happened?
Okay, we'll pause here, and next time we'll do, some of the more kashrut in your kitchen. Okay, so we'll get to some of the details. Next session is going to be, when's it going to be? I have stuff coming up on these Tuesdays. Tuesday the 8th. I can meet Tuesday the 8th, and that's going to be, I think, the last one for a couple of weeks. So let's do Tuesday the 8th. Is that all right?
Mhm.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.
Me too.
Okay, thank you.